Hello and welcome to the JSA studio. I'm your host, as always, Nathan, and today I'm coming at you with my final mock draft of this season. The draft is, in fact, tonight, or at least the first round of the draft is, and I figured that I better go ahead and put out an actual predictive mock draft where I try and figure out what's going to happen. Am I going to do well? No, but that's kind of what's fun. The Bears are obviously going to take Caleb Williams. This, I think, is obvious. I don't really think anybody at this point is going to say that something different is going to happen. Also, at this point, PFF is very low on him. But also at this point, Jade Daniels is going at 2. That seems to be pretty obvious, in my opinion. The draft kind of starts at 3. And what I mean by kind of is it appears to me, in my mind, that the Patriots want Drake May. And I think they've kind of said that they're high on J.J. McCarthy as well to entice the Vikings to give up what they want to trade back if Drake May is not on the board. So if Drake May surprises by going number 2, which in my opinion is what Washington should do, I shouldn't say that. It's what I would do if I was Washington at 2. So if Drake May does go 2, do not be surprised if 3 is traded. I think that's the scenario. I think that Drake May is probably QB2, and I think J.J. McCarthy is probably QB3 on the Patriots board with Jaden Daniels at 4. But the Patriots don't really view J.J. McCarthy or probably Jaden Daniels as like a number 3 overall type of pick. So I think it's Drake May or trade down for them. Now, luckily for them, Drake May is in fact here. Arizona, I think, is in a similar sort of situation, but with Marvin Harrison. I think they're going to take Marvin Harrison unless a team blows themselves out of the water with an offer. That would likely have to include probably 3 first-round picks if they're going to fall back farther than 6. And I don't think the Giants are going after a quarterback in this draft. That's just my gut feeling. I don't think they want to trade up, and maybe if Drake May falls to them at 6 for some reason, then they take him. But I don't think they're going to take McCarthy, and I don't think they're going to reach on another quarterback. But Arizona, I don't think anybody's going to come up and trade up at 4. I think Arizona is going to be asking for too much, and I think they're going to stick and pick with Marvin Harrison. The Chargers, I think at this point, with Marvin Harrison off the board, I think they're trade down pretty much at all costs. And I think they're going to take whatever offer they get that is the best offer to trade down. And I don't think the Vikings are going to give them that best offer. Because if you're the Chargers, or if I'm the Chargers, I'm not trading down unless I'm getting 11 and 23. And I do not think, really under any circumstances, the Vikings are giving up both of those picks. So I have a trade here, and I think it's the team that's most likely to like J.J. McCarthy more than everybody else, most likely to give up the kind of capital that the Chargers are asking for to move up for J.J. McCarthy, and I also think it is arguably the best place for J.J. McCarthy to go. Who is that? It's the Las Vegas Raiders. I think this trade would have to look something like this. I don't know if that's because I'm giving up too much trade here. I don't know, but I think this is likely. It's going to involve multiple first-round picks. The fact of the matter is that this is trading up for a quarterback. It's going to involve multiple first-round picks, especially because the Chargers are falling outside of Joe Alt range, which is something that they could force them to do. I don't know if this... Maybe that works a little bit better. Maybe it's a third-round pick instead of a second-round pick. I don't know. Force a trade. I don't really care. I'm not going beyond the first round. The point is the Raiders pick at 5. The Raiders are going to take J.J. McCarthy. And the Chargers now pick at 13. Now we move on to the New York Giants. And this is kind of where the draft actually starts to get going. I think at this point, the top 4 quarterbacks are off the board. And the obvious next selection with Marvin Harrison is also off the board. So the Giants, I think they're going to go with Malik Nabers, the wide receiver out of LSU. I think he's probably the next best player. I do have him as my wide receiver too. And on terms of a big board, I have him as the best player on the board. The Titans are taking Joe Alt. The Titans are taking Joe Alt. I have felt for a significant amount of time that Joe Alt's ceiling is 5 to the Chargers and his floor is 7 to the Titans. I'm not as confident in Joe Alt going to the Titans as I was in Bijan Robinson going to the Falcons last year, because I knew that pick was going to happen. In fact, in my little breakdowns that I had of Bijan Robinson, I said his floor was pick number 8 to the Falcons, and his ceiling was pick number 8 to the Falcons. So I think that Joe Alt is kind of in a similar position with Tennessee. They have a massive need at left tackle, and Joe Alt is maybe the best offensive tackle prospect in a very long time, depending upon who you ask. The Falcons are on the clock next at pick 8. And this is interesting because they could take Rome Odunze. I don't think they will. If Malik Nabers was here, they might take Malik Nabers. But Malik Nabers isn't here. So instead, I have them going with the player that I think fits them best and their defense, and that is Dallas Turner out of Alabama. Explosive, very good athlete, great bend, and overall, I think he will be an impact player as a pass rusher year one. Not my edge one, but if I was the Falcons, he probably would be my edge one because he fits their scheme very, very well. The Bears at pick 9. And this, I think, is where we're going to get our first surprise. The fact of the matter is that the Bears don't have a lot of picks in this draft. And yes, Rome Odunze is on the board. And yes, Rome Odunze is probably, maybe, the best player on the board. But I don't think the Bears are going to take Rome Odunze. I think they actually want to tackle, and they're kind of hoping that Rome Odunze is off the board so their fans don't give them that shit. All that being said, somebody is going to trade up here. This is going to be the first shocking sort of trade. I'm having Jacksonville trade up. I'm going to have them give up second and a future second to move up to 9. Maybe a future third. I'm going to force this trade, but that seems a little bit more balanced here because the Bears only have 4 picks. They don't have a second round pick, and they don't have any day 3 picks. Well, they have one day 3 pick in the 4th round. Anyway, we're going to force this trade through. The Jacksonville Jaguars, who are desperate for wide receiver, are going to come up and get Rome Odunze, and he is going to be a very, very good number 1 wide receiver for them, probably year 1. If this trade up doesn't happen, I think you could see Jacksonville trade for T. Higgins or Brandon Ayuk. I am not going to have T. Higgins or Brandon Ayuk get traded in this scenario because I don't think they actually get traded in real life. I don't know about Trey Hendrickson either, but even if he does, I think that's probably more for a second or early 3rd round pick rather than a 1st round pick. So I don't think he'll have a whole lot of say on this draft here. The Jets here at 10, this is easy. I think they're taking Brock Bowers. I think they're all in on the Super Bowl this year. I don't think they have a good enough team to win the Super Bowl. I don't think Brock Bowers puts them over the edge into Super Bowl contention, but I think they're going to take Brock Bowers because he's an instant impact contender for Rookie of the Year as a tight end, which is not something you can say very often. The Vikings are up next at pick 11, and what are they going to do? They didn't get the trade pulled off for J.J. McCarthy. Now, I think in real life, if they don't trade up for J.J. McCarthy, I think they're probably just going to sit here and chill. So I'm going to have them take Byron Murphy. I think that Byron Murphy is a player that they're going to really, really like. I think they're at least somewhat confident that Sam Darnold can play good enough to allow them to win football games. So I think that they're going to stack up players that are relatively close to blue chip status. In terms of Byron Murphy, I think he actually is blue chip status for most people. All right, the Denver Broncos are up next. And speaking of quarterback play, that'll be just okay. I don't think there's a shot in hell that the Broncos are taking anyone other than Bo Nix. Would I take Bo Nix with the 12th pick of the draft? No. Would I take him with a first-round pick? No. But I'm not doing what I would do here. I'm trying to predict what would happen. I don't think Zach Wilson deters them from taking a quarterback at all. I don't think they have their starting quarterback on the roster. I think they're going to draft Bo Nix at 12, and he is going to be phenomenally average for them for a significant period of time. Now on the clock are the Los Angeles Chargers, and they are going to take someone who is not my offensive tackle, but is someone that they're going to take, I think, in real life, and that's J.C. Latham. If he's on the board, I think they take J.C. Latham. They might even take J.C. Latham at 5 over Joe Alt. That's how high I think they're going to be on J.C. Latham. I'm not that high on him. I still have a first-round grade on him, but I'm not that high on him. The Saints are also, I think, another one of these players that are locked into a guy, and I think that's Olu Fashanu out of Penn State. I think if he's there, they're taking him. I think there's a possibility that if Rome Odunze is off the board and they don't like the trade down candidates, that the Bears at 9 could take Olu Fashanu to be their left tackle of the future. But I think that's unlikely. I think that's like the 3rd or 4th most likely thing to happen with the 9th pick of the draft. So I have the Saints taking Olu Fashanu at pick 14. The Colts at 15 are a really, really tough team to draft for, to know what they're going to do. They're, I think, realistically probably the floor for Brock Bowers, but I have Brock Bowers going at 10. So what are they going to do here? And I thought very long and very hard about this pick, because at least in this draft, that pick right there was kind of the turning point. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is this pick kind of decided how the rest of the draft was going to go. They're going to take a wide receiver, and they're not going to take any of the wide receivers listed right here. None of them. We're going down the board, ladies and gentlemen. And according to PFF, we're going really down the board. We're taking Xavier Worthy. There have been credible reports from even back before the scouting combine that Xavier Worthy was, in fact, on most teams' boards, the wide receiver 4. Now, I've got a top 40 grade on Xavier Worthy. I think this may be a little bit of a reach, but it's not out of the question for me. For a lot of people, it is. For PFF, he was like number 68 or whatever the fuck he was. He was just there. I didn't bother to look. I didn't think about it. But I like Xavier Worthy. I don't think he's a wide receiver 1. Cool. The Colts don't need a wide receiver 1. They have Michael Pittman, who can at least somewhat fill that role. Okay, they've also got other weapons at the tight end position, a decent offensive line, a quality running game with a quarterback that can throw it just about anywhere he wants to. I think Xavier Worthy is a very good piece for them as a complement to Michael Pittman. And I think that's a pick that is very realistic. And I also think as we're approaching the middle of the draft here, this is where we're going to decide what's going on here. At least in terms of what positions get ran on, so to speak, and what positions fall. Up next, I have the Seattle Seahawks, and I think they're jumping for joy because Troy Fautanu is still on the board. Troy Fautanu likely becomes a guard for them, probably at left guard. And should Charles Cross or potentially Abraham Lucas on the other side gets hurt or perhaps just isn't playing particularly well, Troy Fautanu could play left tackle or right tackle. And I think that he's probably going to stay as a guard for the most part because I like both of those players. But that versatility has been pushing him up and up the board throughout this draft cycle, especially when his arms came in and hit above that required measurement in terms of arm length and stuff like that. Now, he just kind of barely got there, but he did get there, which is a big deal for a lot of teams. And the Bears are sitting here and they're saying, well, fuck. We traded down hoping to get a left tackle of the future here. Cool. Those were all gone. Between the trade down, Fashanu and Fautanu both went. Those were the two guys that I think they were targeting with a trade down here. Okay, well, what are we going to do then? Well, we're going to take a wide receiver, and we're going to take a wide receiver that complements the pieces that we already have on this team. We have a Z with DJ Moore. We have a slot guy with Keenan Allen. We have a quality Y tight end with Cole Kmet. What do we need? Well, we're going to go get ourselves an X receiver who plays more like a Z stylistically, and that's Brian Thomas Jr. Now, I will say, there is a significant possibility that Brian Thomas Jr. falls farther than this and potentially out of the first round. Some teams have apparently flagged him for a shoulder injury that could be a problem and perhaps a reoccurring one at that. So I'm not convinced he ends up going in the top 20, even though I have him graded as a top 10 player in this class. I love Brian Thomas Jr., but he's just kind of the player that I end up high on. So it might just be me. This might be a little bit of bias here. But I do think that if the Bears were to trade down, specifically this far with Jacksonville, I think they would be targeting either Troy Fautanu or Olu Fashanu in that trade down, and potentially would maybe even trade up a little bit if one of them goes off the board. But I didn't have that playing out. I think when we look back at this, I think most of these teams are likely to stick and pick. I think at this point, the Bears were just like, should we trade up to 15? Probably not. They want to take Xavier Worthy. I think that this is likely to play out if the Bears trade down, in which case maybe you look at a day 2 guy. We did pick up a second round pick, I think, in this trade back scenario. So the Bengals are on the clock right now. I think if Brian Thomas Jr. was there, they would have to seriously think about taking Brian Thomas Jr. and trading T. Higgins. Potentially maybe to the team picking right here. But that is not what I'm going to do right now. In fact, I think there's a team that has been linked, not necessarily to the Bengals, but to a team that has desperately been trying to trade up. And that's the Philadelphia Eagles. So, I have the Philadelphia Eagles trading up with the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm going to give them 22, 53, and they're going to give me 97 and 18. I think that's a relatively fair trade here in terms of value. Maybe they'll throw in 172 just to make it a little bit more enticing for the Bengals and actually gain picks. All right, so we'll do that. The Eagles are now on the clock. Who are the Eagles trading up for? The Eagles have been linked to a wide receiver for forever. I think that's smoke. I think that's, well, not just smoke. I think that's smoke screen smoke, because there's two kinds of smoke. There's fire smoke and there's smoke screen smoke. Okay? I think that's smoke screen smoke, because I think they're trading up for a tackle. And specifically, I think they're trading up for a very specific right tackle in this draft class. And that is Armarius Mims. Lane Johnson's 33. He's been fantastic. He's a Hall of Famer, okay? And the best tackle in that class where they had 3 tackles go in the first 4 picks. By far. It's not even a discussion. But, man, he's 33, man. He might retire. I thought he was going to retire this year. He didn't, but he might retire next year. And you need an offensive tackle pretty bad. Because you do have the left tackle whose name is escaping me right now. And yeah, he's set in stone. He'll be there for the next few years. But you don't got fuck all behind those 2 guys. Mims, I do think, has potential to potentially flip to the left side if needed. Georgia is well known for making their offensive linemen do their reps on both sides of the ball. So I think Mims, maybe he wouldn't be great at it at first, but I think especially with the Eagles offensive line coach, he could potentially flip to the left side if needed. That's not what they're going to do. They're going to sit his ass for a year, and then he's going to take over as their starting right tackle next season. The Rams at 19 here. I think the Rams at this point are looking at it. They say, okay, the tackles are off the board. There's one tackle that I'm like still really high on, me personally. But the Rams are like, okay, at this point, there's still a bunch of day 2 tackles that we really, really like. We're going to wait on it. Maybe if we start to see 1 or 2 come off the board, maybe we'll trade up in the second round. I think they're going to take an impact player here. And it's not going to be Johnny Newton. It's going to be Laiatu Latu. I think the Rams know better than to try to replace Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald is not replaceable. Aaron Donald is one of the 3 best defensive players in the history of football. They're not going to replace Aaron Donald. So go get a guy who's going to be good and help you, but at a different position so that he doesn't have all that weight to carry. And that's Laiatu Latu. I think he's a very high floor player. But I also think the ceiling is pretty high. I think his ceiling could be something like an Aiden Hutchinson from this past year. Okay? I don't think he's the athlete that Aiden Hutchinson is, but he's not a bad athlete by any means. The Steelers at pick 20. They're not going to pick here. Whoops, I went to do this. They're not going to pick here. I had the Buffalo Bills coming up with them. I don't know what this would look like. I don't know, something like this. I don't know. Maybe we had to give up that. I don't know. But I think the Bills are going to end up trading up. And specifically, I think they're going to want to get ahead of the Bengals and potentially Minnesota. Because Minnesota might just take a wide receiver and say, fuck it, we'll go get a quarterback next year. So they want to get ahead of these 2 teams here. The Steelers, I think, are interested in trading down, especially with this run on offensive tackles, specifically on the left side, because even though their first-round pick last year, whose name I'm blanking on yet again, a kid out of Georgia who I really, really liked, I had a top 20 grade on him. I think they are planning on moving him back to left tackle unless they could draft a left tackle. But I don't think they would like Fuaga, who at this point is falling very, very far. But there's always one guy that kind of falls for no reason, and there's always a position that just doesn't get taken, even though there are several teams that need to address that position. Anyway, I got the Bills trading up here to pick 20, and they're going to take the shocker of the first round. There's always a guy that goes way earlier than people are expecting him to do. Okay? And at this point, we have to remember the early smoke. Early smoke is typically fire smoke. The smoke that comes out right after the national championship game, right before the Senior Bowl, right before the NFL scouting combine. Those are when you start to see fire smoke. That's also when particularly adept teams will also start to release some potentially not fire smoke sort of smoke. Well, they'll start to leak some things out there. Like that was right before the Senior Bowl was when we started to hear that Pittsburgh really, really liked the kid out of Liberty, the quarterback who's went to the Titans in the 3rd round. That kid, that was when we started to hear that they really, really liked him. And yeah, No, they took Kenny Pickett instead. That was all smoke. But I think the Bills here are going to go for a wide receiver, and I don't think it's going to be the wide receiver that people are expecting. But the early smoke said that Troy Franklin was going to go higher than people think that he was going to go. Now, I don't like Troy Franklin like this. I think he's going to be an excellent wide receiver too at the next level. I think he's a complementary piece, and I think the Bills need a wide receiver 1. But Troy Franklin does fit very, very well with Josh Allen. He fits very, very well in that offense that they run, and he gives them something that they don't particularly have with the loss of Gabe Davis. Now, I don't think Troy Franklin is replacing Stephon Diggs. I think he's replacing Gabe Davis, like I kind of just said. I think Khalil Shakir is the one that's going to replace Stephon Diggs, because Khalil Shakir was the guy who stole all of Stephon Diggs' snaps towards the end of the season. So, and targets more so. I think that is their plan, and then I also think they plan on getting Dalton Kincaid more involved in the offense. I think Troy Franklin is a complementary piece. I think he's their deep threat, which is honestly, even when they had Gabe Davis, not something they had a lot, or at least consistently. The Dolphins at pick 21, I think there's a couple of ways that they could go this. I do think they are one of the teams that will be interested in Fuaga, but I think they're going to say, okay, there's a ton of day 2 tackles that we really, really like still. And even though there's kind of been a run on offensive tackles here, we're going to take a guy that fell past his value here. We're going to take Johnny Newton. The Dolphins have been linked to Johnny Newton throughout this process. They're not going to trade up for him. But if he falls, I don't think that they're going to entertain pretty much anything. I think they're just going to take him. The Bengals at 22 after trading down, I think they're jumping for joy, because even though the Bears failed when they were trading down, rather, to get the guy that they wanted, which I think would be Troy Fautanu if they were to trade down. They didn't get him. He went 1 pick before them. I think the Bengals here got lucky because Fuaga is still here. And I really like Fuaga. I have him as a top 10 grade. If you've seen my video on the top 10 position players on offense, I really, really like Fuaga. He's my, I think, tackle 2. And I think the Bengals here channel a little bit of their in-division rival down here, pick 30. And they go ahead and just take the player that falls to them, even though they traded down a little bit, which is also something the Ravens do quite a bit. But Fuaga is now a Cincinnati Bengal. And the Minnesota Vikings at pick 23, they didn't get to trade up for a quarterback done. The Raiders came in and gave up more than they were willing to give up. They decided not to take a quarterback at 11 like Bo Nix. And I think that's mainly because Bo Nix doesn't particularly fit what they like to do. They're going to take Michael Penix. I like Michael Penix. I'm fine taking Michael Penix here. I know a lot of people aren't. I don't think the medical concerns are as much as other people do. The fact of the matter is that he's played the past 2 years fully healthy. And it's not like he hasn't gotten hit. He got beat to hell against Michigan. And he got up every time. Did he play well? No. But nobody's going to play well when they're getting hit like he was getting hit, okay? And also there were a couple of plays that they just missed or got called back on a penalty that would have made it look like he was playing a lot better than just the box score numbers would indicate. Because he did play well. It's just that Michigan's defense was partially that good. And also, I just think that they were a little bit off that day. Nevertheless, you go back 1 week against Texas, and yeah, Texas didn't have a great secondary. But you go back 1 week against Texas, and all of a sudden people were talking about him as a top 5 pick. Okay? Because he does have that kind of potential. I really like Michael Penix. I have a top 40 grade on him. I bumped him up from the quarterback video because the medicals after the combine came back good for him. I think this is a good fit in Minnesota. I think there's basically no pressure for him to come in and play right away. And I think this is a relatively realistic scenario because I don't think Michael Penix Jr. goes before this. I think his ceiling is 23 to the Vikings. Dallas at 24. This is one that I had to think about a little bit as well, but ultimately, is he not in here? Ultimately, Graham Barton was the player that I went to here. Graham Barton gives you flexibility. I think the plan with letting Tyron Smith walk was to move Tyler Smith to left tackle and then draft a guard in the first round. And that's Graham Barton. Because at this point, Graham Barton's probably the best true guard right here. I think Jackson Powers Johnson is better as a center. But I think Barton is better as a guard, even though I think both of them could play the other positions, okay? Maybe Graham Barton ends up at center. Who knows? Maybe they take like a Patrick Paul at the end of the second round to be their left tackle, and then Barton ends up at center and Smith at guard. Who knows? I don't know. But in this scenario, I think Graham Barton gives you that flexibility. He could play all three interior spots, and I think in a pinch, he could be an emergency left or right tackle. That's a very, very, very valuable player to have. The Packers are going to take Cooper DeJean. They're probably going to move him to safety. I don't know how I feel about that, but it is what it is. And I think this is when you're going to start to see some of the DBs come off the board. I think DB, and specifically outside cornerback, is a position that's going to fall a lot farther than people are willing to admit. And specifically, I think there's one player that is going to be absolutely shocking in terms of he fell out of the first round. How the hell did that happen? Now, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are on the clock here, and they are finally going to get Jackson Powers Johnson off the board. I love Jackson Powers Johnson. He's a top 20 grade for me. I love Jackson Powers Johnson. I think he steps in and plays at a borderline Pro Bowl level year one as a center or a guard for them. At 27, another guy who fell a little bit from the consensus, but fell a lot of it from my personal opinion, is Jared Verse for the Cardinals. The Cardinals are a team that could look to trade up to get an edge rusher, but I think they looked at this and they said, okay, offensive lineman, quarterback, offensive lineman, probably not edge rusher, probably not edge rusher. So they were like, I don't really need to trade up. Whoops. I don't think I really need to trade up here. I can just sit here and take one of the two or three guys that I really like still. Now, Jared Verse is a guy I really, really like, and I think that he'll do great things for the Cardinals in this scenario. The Steelers at pick 28. What are they going to do? Well, they're going to take Quinyon Mitchell. Quinyon Mitchell is an interesting player. Is he someone that the Steelers potentially really, really like? The answer to that question, I think, is yes. I think that they would love Quinyon Mitchell. They haven't really been linked to DBs or Quinyon Mitchell specifically, but when you look at Quinyon Mitchell, he's not someone that you really want to have playing in a press scheme. He's someone that you want to be off the ball in zone coverage, preferably. But he could also play off man if he wanted him to. He's very technically sound in that regard as well. And the Steelers run a lot of different zone coverages, but they're a predominantly zone football team. I think Quinyon Mitchell does fit the scheme, and I think having Joey Porter Jr. be his running mate allows him to not be that number one press corner that can play press cover 3 or cover 2 jam sort of stuff. So I think that's a very, very good pick for them. I have him graded as a top 10 player in this class. This might be the steal of the first round. Another player that is also a steal at this point, but I could see them doing this simply because it would make me happy. And that's weird because I'm a Lions fan and they don't usually make me happy. But the past fucking 3 drafts with Brad Holmes, they've made me happy for the most part, except for Jahmyr Gibbs. But that is what it is. I don't need to rehash that. I made a video about that last year. You can go find it if you want to. They're going to take Terrion Arnold. I think he fits their scheme beautifully. I think he's the only press man corner worthy of a first-round pick. And let's be real, they don't have a CB1 on their roster. They just don't. They just don't. Carlton Davis has gotten worse each of the past 3 years. And also, he's never really played in a scheme that has asked him to predominantly play man coverage and to predominantly press. So, I'm not sure that's going to work out. Like, a lot of people are convinced it's going to work out. But I think Terrion Arnold is going to work out. I really like Terrion Arnold. Anyway, Ravens on the clock here. What do the Ravens do when they draft in the first round? What do they usually do? They either do one of 3 things. They either take a hyper-athletic edge rusher, some defensive back that nobody has expected them to take, or they take whatever player, which was low-key in need, but not really in need, that fell to them. Okay, contrary to popular opinion, the Ravens do not draft best player available. Okay, they don't. It's because no team in the NFL drafts best player available. That is a lie that they perpetuate because it makes them sound good. Okay, no, that's not how it works. So what are the Ravens going to do here? Well, unfortunately for Ravens fans, but fortunately for me because I really like the player, it's been a minute since they've taken a hyper-athletic but raw edge rusher. They're going to take Chop Robinson. I really like the fit. I have a top 20 grade on Chop Robinson, but I really, really, really like the fit with the Ravens. And I really, really like Chop Robinson just in general. I think this is someone who year 1 in the NFL is going to surpass his sack total for his entire college career. I think he only had like 6.5 sacks his entire college career. But that was because he was identified like after week 1 in his sophomore year 2 years ago as like a guy like, oh, we can't let this guy get going, so we're going to double and triple team him. I really, really like Chop Robinson, and I think the Ravens might have finally gotten themselves that edge piece that they've been desperately searching for since Terrell Suggs got old and retired. The 49ers are on the clock now, and the 49ers are going to take a player that I don't think a lot of people have linked to them, but I sure as shit do. Now, PFF and me are of similar minds on Darius Robinson, who they're going to take, which is late second round sort of guy. But they're going to take Darius Robinson. Now, you're looking at this here with this last pick here. It's pretty obvious who the Chiefs are going to take in this scenario. But before we talk about that, we talk about the guys that aren't going in the first round. Specifically, Nate Wiggins and Kool-Aid McKinstry. I think corners are going to fall. Partially because there are a lot of corners on day 2 of this draft that are pretty good. Once you get past, in my opinion, corner 4, it starts to get a little mucky in terms of what order you want to draft these players. So I think teams are going to wait on DBs for the most part. Unless a team that has an excellent scheme fit, like the Steelers and Quinyon Mitchell, or the Lions and Terrion Arnold, decide just to take a guy. Okay? I don't really see a lot of teams prioritizing defensive back on day 1 of the draft. That being said, I think we see a run on defensive backs on day 2. Pretty early on. But the one that's, I think, surprising, this is absolutely shocking, is Kool-Aid McKinstry in this scenario. Like, I had to go through and be like, did I forget a team that could draft a corner? No. And I'm like, okay, well, I think the Lions might be interested in him at 29, but Terrion Arnold's there, so they're not going to take him. I don't know. It's really weird because he's in, like, every first-round mock draft, but the way that this board broke, because that's kind of the way that I went about this, was, oh, I'm going to take this player, and then okay, this is where the draft changes, which I talked about with the Colts at 15. That's where the draft kind of got decided, in my opinion. These 3 picks here, likely Worthy, Fitanu, and Brian Thomas, was where the draft kind of gets decided in terms of how things are going to go. Because pretty much right up here, this is chalk, except for maybe the Vikings at 11. But that's pretty much chalk. Like, that's what most people expect to have happen. And now we're at the end of this, and we're just like, oh, man, there's several players that were considered first-round locks that are not going to go in the first round. And that happens every year. So I do think that's realistic in that sense. But moving on here to the Chiefs at 32. They're going to take Adani or A.D. Mitchell. I don't know which one he prefers. I never bothered to look it up. But I'm not going to click on draft quite yet, because there came out recently, like a couple days ago, and this is where you got to be careful with the smoke, that there were several teams that did not have A.D. Mitchell on the board because of the effort concerns. Now, yes, there are effort concerns with him. He takes plays off. There's no doubt in anybody's mind that has watched him play. He takes 4, 5, 6 plays off a game where he knows he's not going to get the ball and he doesn't particularly give a fuck. Okay? Generally speaking, when you're getting paid millions of dollars, which A.D. Mitchell was not getting paid millions of dollars to play at Texas. I don't care. I don't give a fuck how good you think NIL is. They're not making a third of what they're going to make in the NFL, okay? Even, like, the best NIL deals in the country are they're not making NFL money. That's not how it works. But A.D. Mitchell, with his livelihood now attached to that effort, and the fact that he knows on any play with Patrick Mahomes that he could get a target because he could scramble around, extend the play, all of that, I don't think it's a concern in the correct situation. And the Chiefs are the correct situation for A.D. Mitchell. They kind of need that guy. They kind of need a physical X receiver who could also be a deep threat, because A.D. Mitchell can do both of those things. He can be an X or a Z if they want him to be. He's not going to give you a whole lot after the catch, admittedly, but he fills a massive need for them, and he's also just a really good player. I have a top 20 grade on him, in spite of the effort concerns. He'd be borderline top 10 if he didn't have the effort concerns, for me, personally. So I'm going to go ahead and get draft. And it's at this point, as this loads, I would like to ask you to like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and if at any point you disagreed with me, or you just have something to say, go ahead and drop a comment down in the comment section below. And now with the outro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to say, and that is that I'll see you next time.